Hi, it's Dr. Saira, and I have to tell you up front that I'm a little bit nervous about this particular video. And the reason for that is because I know there are people who are not going to necessarily love what I have to say. They might even hate it. So I have to just state that disclaimer up front. There it is. So what I want to talk to you about today is the myth of the lone wolf. I've talked about this in another video or two over the years, but I want to come at it from a little bit of a different angle. So let me give you a little bit of background to this concept, the myth of the lone wolf. So this is a concept that I taught many, many years ago. I had a course on burnout. And the people who took that course were generally high-performing executives, business people, entrepreneurs, people who had a lot on their plate and a lot going on, and they were super busy. And they were also kind of really highly functional. And the course was about burnout. So they weren't functioning to their optimum. And so kind of late in the course, like many weeks in, we came to this topic of the myth of the lone wolf. So let me explain what that is. Have you ever seen that picture, maybe on like t-shirts or maybe like a poster of this wolf, and he's like howling at the moon, and it looks so kind of like romantic and mysterious, and it looks really beautiful, right? And you can imagine it like a single solitary wolf and howling, and then the moon is in the background, and it's like so magical. And what I was teaching and what I want to tell you and remind you today is that is actually a myth. The lone wolf is a problematic character, because in the real world, wolves function in packs. They hunt in packs, they live in packs. They're social mammals that live in community. And there's a social hierarchy in that community. Everybody there's a way that leadership works in that community, but it's a community living experience. So if there's a lone wolf, it's because it's either been somehow abandoned by its pack or shunned from the pack and actually like asked to leave. So that wolf that's howling at the moon is a freaking lonely wolf. And that wolf who's howling at the moon all by themselves is probably going to die very soon unless he finds a pack, or unless she finds a pack. So it's a myth. And one of the things that I've noticed for people who are highly functioning, right? So there's a lot going on, they're juggling a lot of balls, is many of those people have internalized this myth of the lone wolf. And there's a little bit of celebration of that in our at least in Western capitalistic culture. There's a little bit of celebration around, like, look at this person, they're doing it all on their own. There's such a, like, look at all their accomplishments. And what we don't really often talk about is all of the support systems that are actually there for the lone wolf, that they actually have a wolf pack. And this is the part that you might not like, especially if you're someone who prides yourself as being a lone wolf, okay? Even if you are doing it all alone, you're actually not. Because that car that you're driving, you didn't make that car. Someone else made it. That gas that you put in the car, you weren't the one who figured out how to get the gas into the thing at the gas station. Someone else did all of that. The teams of people did all of that. If you are, okay, so maybe you're like, well, I don't even drive a car, Dr. Saira. I walk everywhere. All right, but did you make the shoes that you're walking in? Probably not. Did you hand make all your clothes? Unlikely. Just showing up in, okay, so then you might say, well, what about those people who actually do make all their own clothes and shoes and walk everywhere? Okay, fair. Are they eating food? Did they grow all that food? And even if they did grow all that food, did they go to the well and supply the water that, and even if they did that, in those communities where people do everything themselves, they're community-based living. It's not one single person doing all those jobs, right? It's a community that's doing all those jobs. Even in that extreme, like you can take it to the extreme, right? Very, very traditional societies that are still rooted in those do everything yourself sort of thinking. One single person can't. It's impossible. So just a little bit of a reality check that even if you're doing it alone, you're actually not doing it alone. And you know that this came to me in kind of a humbling way from one of my mentors, because I was journaling, right? I was journaling about something and journaling. And then I had a meeting with her. And I talked to her about how I'm doing everything alone. And this was during my grad program many years ago. And I was away from home, right? I was in California at this university, and I felt really, really, really alone. And I was kind of priding myself on that. Like, look at me, I'm alone, I'm doing all this stuff. And I was journaling about it, and I talked to my mentor, and she said, well, no, you're not actually doing it all alone. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she said, well, first of all, you're sitting here talking to me, so you're letting some help in. I was like, okay, fair. And she's like, and second of all, when you journaled last night, that pen that you journaled with, did you make that pen? And I was like, no, that's a weird question. She's like, did you make the book that you journaled in? And I was like, no. And it kind of landed, like, you know how when the Zen monks like slap the other guy across the face, and it's like, oh, and then they got it. Like, it felt like that to me. It felt like a face slap moment where I was like, oh, you're absolutely right. I've been telling myself that I'm doing it alone, and I'm proud of that in a way. And it's actually only half true. It's not the whole truth. So that was a little bit hard for me to accept, but I really internalized that. And then, so I started kind of acknowledging that, okay, I'm not only doing it alone. What I want to talk about today a little bit more deeply is the next level of this, okay? Which is now the wolf pack. So say you have figured out that you're not actually doing it alone, and that you actually weren't ever designed to do it alone. It's actually quite unhealthy to try to do it all alone. And you start gathering up your wolf pack, right? You start kind of connecting with people who are like you and who have similar interests or viewpoints or values. And you start to kind of form this group. And it could be friends, it could be family, it could be new people that are becoming friends. And you're starting to kind of build this community. So then there's another layer to that. And this is a bit more insidious, okay? Here we go. Woohoo! So then we have to talk about belonging. There's this weird trick that we play on ourselves about how different we are and how we're not like anybody else. And we tend to do this. And why we do this is a trick of the ego. This is an adaptation that we've developed from when we were little to say, well, if I'm not included, then I must be different. And so we kind of start internalizing this story that I'm different than other people. And many of us do this. Some people don't do this, but most of us have this narrative of like, I'm not like other people. So then as you're gathering your wolf pack, the question of belonging comes up, right? Because if I've told myself I'm not like other people, right? I'm not maybe as smart as other people, or I'm not as talented as other people, or I'm more talented than other people, or I'm smarter than other. However we do that, whether it's I'm better, right? Putting ourselves in the superior position, or I'm not as good, putting ourselves in the inferior position. Either way, we've told ourselves I'm not like other people. So what happens then is as you gather your wolf pack, there will be moments where that seeps through, it leaks through. And there's almost like these invisible walls that go up, and we separate ourselves from the group. It's very subtle, and it's a trick. It's an adaptation. It's something that maybe made sense at some point in our past to help us survive the uncomfortable group environments, but it's a trick and it's not the truth. And so then what happens is that we start scanning this group to figure out where we're gonna, where that hidden voice is gonna be proven true. Okay, so then when, a group of my friends all have a get together and I'm not invited to that, I make that mean something. I'm like, oh, it's because I don't really fit. I don't really belong. I'm different. It could just be that, well, they all live in, this small town and I'm a really far drive away and they just thought it'd be inconvenient. They didn't invite me. It could be that they all have kids and I don't, and it's a family kind of get together thing. It could be that they just forgot. It could be that the last time we hung out, I was kind of prickly, and so they're like, oh, she's going through a thing. Whatever the reason was, doesn't really matter, but I'm going to make it mean something about my differentness. And this is so, I see this all the time, and it's frustrating for me. It's frustrating for me. As an extrovert, self-proclaimed, I love groups and people and gatherings, right? Not all the time. I'm learning. I can't do that all the time. But generally I like that. And so when I see people holding themselves at this distance and saying like, well, I don't really know if I fit here and I don't really like it. And over the last couple of years, I've become really, really, really good friends with somebody who's a self-proclaimed introvert. And I mean, we have a theory that, nobody's really either of those things fully, right? But she's a self-proclaimed introvert. And so I'm learning about how there, like, all of the inner conversation, all of the inner dialogue that happens for her as she extends herself to be part of a group, right? And all of the internal, like, kind of hoops and barriers that she has to jump in order to participate fully and show up authentically. And it's funny because I've also been married to an introvert for like 17 years, and probably I should have learned that a little sooner. Sorry, husband. But I'm seeing it now in a different way, right? So whether you're an introvert or an extrovert doesn't really matter. This myth of the lone wolf happens for all of us, where we say, I don't need people. I can do this on my own. I'm fine. And then as we realize that actually is quite not adaptive, we do need people, and we're interacting with others even all the time, whether we admit it or not. As we start to build our community, this thing can happen where that old mentality of the lone wolf seeps through and prevents us from actually joining and getting a sense of belonging, interpreting certain things as a personal attack or a personal exclusion, when really maybe it has nothing to do with you, maybe nothing to do with you at all. So this is kind of my thoughts, and it's really up for me right now because of what's happening in the expansion project. Our team is growing. And it's such incredible people that are showing up and asking to be part of this. And what that's meant for me is another deepening into the wolf pack, right? Extending our wolf pack, inviting people in who are, maybe very different than me. And maybe have very like a different worldview and different perspectives, and bring something that for me is a complete blind spot. And it's so rich. That diversity of all the different people that are coming is a richness, right? And I'm aware of that thing around belonging, right? And how it's such a internal, it's an internal narrative that I'm inviting our team, and I'm inviting you to start to challenge that narrative that you're so different from other people. No, actually, we're pretty much the same. When we go beyond our constricted human adaptations and our limitations and our smallness and our doubt and our self-attack and other attack, when we go beyond all of that and we actually tune into who we really are, at that level, we're all the same. We're all the same, despite whatever this particular human life gives all of us different experiences, absolutely, right? And some of us are, we're in different scenarios and we respond to things differently. And it's not about erasing that complexity and diversity. I love that. That's what makes our human species so rich. And the spiritual principle is we are all the same. See, the ego and the brain will have a hard time holding that, right? Well, you just said we're all the same, but now you're saying that there's diversity and difference. Yeah, and it's all true. It's all true. So I just wanted to share those thoughts with you today. I hope you were able to follow the thread. Maybe I pissed you off with this approach, but I want to challenge you and look at, where are the places in your life where you're holding yourself apart because you feel different. You've told yourself a story that you're different, and you're not actually allowing yourself to join. Now, not every wolf pack is for you, right? That's okay. There's the riverside wolf pack, and there's the, forest side wolf pack, and you'll find the people that kind of jive with you and that, the place that you feel most settled in. And whether it's with your own kind of community and group or others, can we remember that spiritual principle that at our essence, we're the same. We're not better than anyone, and we're not worse than anyone. We're all kind of the same. So those are my thoughts today. Hopefully that was enlightening, eye-opening, or maybe annoying. Leave me a comment. I'd love to continue this conversation around the myth of the lone wolf, the capacity to create a wolf pack, and then what happens once the wolf pack arrives as far as this thing about keeping ourselves apart and belonging. Talk to you next time. Bye.